Life's for the living, please won't you let me live? Give you what I'm giving, but ain't got much to give. But empty words and holding songs, and all the folks who sing along. Close my eyes on an empty stage, find a place where I belong. But I'm not you, I'm still I. Oh my Lord, what's left to try to hold on, to hold on. Standing in the shadows, waiting for the light of day. Travel to the church, heard the words the preachers say, telling me where I've gone wrong, praying that I stay strong. No one wants to leave me where I'm not alone. But empty words and open songs, and all the folks to sing along. Close my eyes on an open stage, find a place where I belong. But I'm not you, I'm still I. Oh my Lord, just let you try to hold on, to hold on. The second time around, I sat alone on solid ground, not be found. I told myself don't fight, but oh my Lord, please hear the words we hold inside. We hold inside. Life's for the living, please won't you let me live? Give you what I'm giving, but ain't got much to give. But empty words and olden songs, and all the folks that sing along. Close my eyes on an empty stage, find a place where I belong. But I'm not you, I'm still I. Oh my Lord, what's left to try to hold on, to hold on.
Yelina mai me ke aloha e ka lehulehu. We are Ka'ahala Hui o Ole Kona Hawaiian Civic Club of Oregon and Southwest Washington, a nonprofit organization with a mission to actively participate in the promotion, perpetuation, and the practice of the Native Hawaiian culture and values. One of our goals is to participate in activities which promote the civic, economic, health, education, and social welfare of our community, and particularly the activities of those agencies and clubs who are responsible for the improvement of the conditions of the people and the community. Through these efforts, we would like to welcome Na Kamaliʻi Talk Story, a program offering a safe place for open discussion and conversations around social justice, equity and equality, cultural appropriation, climate change, and education that will be led and driven by today's youth. Black History Month was established to honor the many achievements and influential events of the Black community. BHM, or Black History Month, was created in 1926 by a Harvard graduate historian named Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or ASALH, to help bring awareness and educate our communities about the heroes who have often been forgotten. When Carter G. Woodson introduced this concept, he realized the importance of providing a theme to focus the attention of the public. The intention has never been to dictate or to limit the exploration of the Black experience, but to bring to the public's attention important developments that merit emphasis, to acknowledge that Black history is American history. The month of February was chosen because it coincided with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, who were monumental in the fight for social justice, equality, and equity for all. It was officially recognized by President Gerald Ford, and to this day, every American president has chosen a specific theme to help recognize the Black community. Newly elected President Joe Biden endorsed the theme Black Family, Representation, Identity, and Diversity. ASALH explains, quote, "The Black family has been a topic of study in many disciplines: history, literature, the visual arts and film studies, sociology, anthropology, and social policy. Its representation, identity, and diversity have been reverenced, stereotyped, and vilified from the days of slavery to our own time. The Black family knows no single location, since family reunions and genetic ancestry searches testify to the spread of family members across states, nations, and continents. Not only are individual Black families diasporic, but Africa and the diaspora itself has been long portrayed as a Black family at large. While the role of the Black family has been described by some as a microcosm of the entire race, its complexity as the, quote, foundation of African American life and history can be seen in numerous debates over how to represent its meaning and typicality from a historical perspective, as slave or free, as patriarchal or matriarchal or matrifocal, as single-headed or dual-headed household, as extended or nuclear, as fictive kin or blood lineage, as legal or common law, and as Black or interracial, etc. Variation appears as well in discussions on the nature and impact of parenting, childhood, marriage, gender norms, sexuality, and incarceration. The family offers a rich tapestry of images for exploring the African American past and present." End quote. Today, the youth of Na Kamaliʻi Talk Story and the many ohana hope to learn about the experiences of our guests and take away more awareness into the future. So please help me welcome today's host, Chloe. Aloha, Chloe.
Mahalo, Auntie Ashley. Aloha, my name is Chloe, and I'm a freshman in the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And on behalf of Na Kamaliʻi Talk Story, we welcome you to what will hopefully become a safe and open platform for many of our students and peers. Before we get started with today's talk story, as a community organization here in Oregon, we would like to acknowledge and mahalo the land and its people to which we sit and occupy. Today and all days, we honor and acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial: the Klamath tribe of the Southern Oregon Plateau, the Burns Paiute of the High Desert East, the Coquille of Southern Oregon's coastal forests, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde in the Northern Coast Range, the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua in the Southern Oregon foothills, the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla in the Blue Mountains, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz in Oregon's northern rainforests, the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw on the wind-blown southern coast, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs on the sunny eastern slopes of the Oregon Cascades, and we would like to recognize all the other Indigenous communities who have not been federally recognized and deserve the recognition. We would also like to express our appreciation and respect of the Indigenous people's inherent kinship beliefs when it comes to the land, especially since those beliefs were restricted for so long. As members of the BIPOC community, We know the importance of acknowledgement, and we encourage you to learn more by visiting nativeland.ca. Oregon was built on broken treaties, and the lasting effects of federal and state policies, both past and present, have put Native Americans at a disadvantage for hundreds of years. It's on all of us, whether we are descendants of colonizers or inhabitants of stolen land, to re-educate ourselves and each other. Today, we continue to uplift the mana'o of acknowledgement by sharing space and honoring Black History Month. As youth leaders in our communities, we understand that bringing awareness to the systemic issues that are happening within our education system are important. For example, Black History is definitely more than 1 month, and the idea that we as students continuously have to seek cultural education outside of our classrooms is an issue that needs to be addressed. So before we begin today's talk story, I'd like to introduce and welcome our special guest who will be joining us today. Auntie Celeste Good, who uses pronouns she and her, is an incredible mother of two to Mike and Patrick, and identifies as a Black, successful, and passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Auntie Celeste is the first woman of color to hold Toyota Parts Distribution Center's facility manager position, and has been paving the way for women leaders in her industry and community. In her spare time, Auntie Celeste likes to read and listen to audiobooks. Aloha, Auntie Celeste.
Aloha.
Next, we have Mike Jones, who uses he, they pronouns, is a 20-year-old student who currently attends The Ohio State University. His major is city and urban planning, and he's interested in improving the infrastructure of public transportation and sustainable living spaces. In their spare time, Mike likes to cook, hike, birdwatch, and spend time with his partner, Jay. Mike identifies as Black and is passionate about social justice and the equal treatment of all human beings. Aloha, and Mike.
Aloha.
Mahalo nui loa for being here today. So to kind of go into our first question or overall topic that we can add on to growing up in America, we can definitely see the diverse communities that have helped establish this country. However, white culture dominates this government, and we are led to believe that only history that matters is that of white men. However, we celebrate a major holiday, recognize a great sport, or simply create a monument to honor something great that has happened, is only based on surface information. For example, here in Oregon, 4th graders are all offered an entire unit about the great land discovery of Lewis and Clark, but the tribes who were here from time immemorial are not recognized. And the genocide that happened to Native Americans and the indescribable slavery of the Black community and the constant oppression of the voices that matter continue to be canceled. So today, Kamaliʻi Talk Story chooses to uplift the voices of many great Black heroes who have made history, who are making history, and who will make history. Now we're going into our first question. Our country has committed February as Black History Month, which is 28 days to share the stories of greats who have paved the way for the Black community. If you were able to identify an important event or a specific date that have shaped the Black community, what would it be? And why would you choose that specific one to educate the youth or anybody else?
Well, for me, I think there are several. One in particular is the Supreme Court case Loving versus Virginia. And the reason that I picked that one is simply because at one point in our country, it was illegal for interracial couples to get married. And when I look back on my family in particular, you know, I have nieces and nephews that are half white. I have nieces and nephews that are half Hispanic. So I can't imagine a day and a time where that was not allowed. And then I think back to, you know, just the people that I encounter on a daily basis that are made up of different races. Imagine those people not existing because of a law or an outdated viewpoint that we can't love one another because we don't look like one another. So that was very recent. It wasn't like that was, you know, 100 years ago. It was 50, 60, 70 years ago. So some of our grandparents and our parents were around during that time. So that's one significant one for me.
Something that comes to mind, I don't remember the year exactly. I know it was in the 1800s, but there was a Supreme Court case that ruled that, like, that Black Americans were not, like, they should not be counted in the census. And that's something that I think should, I didn't learn that in high school, but my partner did. When I told him I found out about that, I would also include Juneteenth, which was when, like, the last of slaves knew that they were no longer slaves. So by that time, on June 19th in Texas, a Union general proclaimed to the slaves that they were free. But even then, like a couple months after that, slavery was still legal in 2 other states. So it wasn't until the 13th Amendment where it was abolished.
Yeah, thank you. And you both mentioned the Supreme Court and jury cases, which are all, very important events. And yeah, sorry. Thank you. Mike, you mentioned that like things that school doesn't teach you. And obviously, like someone who's in school, like there's definitely a lot of things that even now we still don't talk about when we're supposed to be like more progressive or moving on and stuff like that. So what are topics or things or people that you guys feel like should be discussed more in schools?
So I understand that Martin Luther King Jr. is talked about in schools, yet schools kind of erase a lot of other things that he talked about, namely, like, just the socialism aspect of America, and how capitalism is not good for the working class and only like benefits like few people. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, that answers it. Thank you. Anything else either of you would like to add to that? No? Okay. So moving on to our next question. One of the great things about Na Kamaliʻi Talk Story is our ability to share stories and learn more about other cultures that are not being shared through our education system. Something that we have found helpful to us are documentaries, podcasts, memoirs, and other resources that allow us to hear about the realness that is out in the world. In a PBS series special, Independent Lens, More Than a Month, filmmaker Shukri Tillman poses the question, should we end Black History Month? He received mixed messages on the matter. Some were concerned removing it would eliminate dialogue altogether, while others disputed this, expressing that eliminating it would prevent the conversation from being restricted to a single month. What is your opinion about Black History Month and its recognition?
First, I want to say thank you for even bringing up the topic. I didn't even know that this was a debate that was going on. When you mentioned it earlier, I was like, there's actually a debate raging as far as whether we should have Black History Month or not. Michael and I were talking about that, and I think I'm on the fence. I truly believe that it should be ingrained into what we're learning about, what our children are learning about all throughout the year. But I think historically we're at such a disadvantage at this point that I think that it needs to remain. There needs to be that focal point or that month where we do a deep dive of things that we're not being taught or things that are not being shared. But I still do agree with the overall message as far as integrating, Black history in with American history, because you really don't see it there's so many things that we miss out on. We don't know about the greatness of who we are. And sometimes you can't actually visualize, the greatness within you if you don't see it displayed outwardly. So I thank you all for even broaching the topic and giving us something to talk about as a Black family.
My answer is a little bit selfish. I was born on the last day of February, so I think that it's great that there is a Black History Month. And in addition to Black History Month, I think all people of color should be have a designated History Month. Yeah.
So why do you believe that?
Because all history is white history. There's not, for me personally at least, there's not a day that goes by where I have to think about the history of the white man. It's almost just in everything.
So it's more just automatic, and that it's not something you have to deeply think about, but with other races you do.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your answers. Dang, oh my gosh, I had a question. So with Black History Month being often restricted to these few days, do you think that a lot of important stuff is left out? And what kind of effort do you wish people put into trying to learn more about Black history, and how do you think they should go about that?
I think this has been a year of learning for me. I'm a learner by nature, but this year I've taken a deeper dive as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it started with, the murder of George Floyd, because it was almost like a tipping point. We, in the Black community, you see this over and over and over again. And it was a psychotic break for the Black community as a whole. It was almost it took our breath away, it seemed like. And so for me, it was learning about, okay, how do we change this? Why do we keep repeating the same things over and over again? And I think it boils down to, we don't know our history. There were certain things that happened, like with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was like, I don't know about that. Should they be out in the streets? Should they be this? They should absolutely be out in the streets. They should absolutely be demanding equal treatment. They should be demanding that we change the system. But unless you know your history and you know that we keep repeating these things over and over again, the outrage isn't there. And I think we need the outrage to funnel into real change. So for me, when we talk about Black history, I think we're scratching the surface, but we're not going deep. We still, suffer from some of the structure that's in place today. You look at Black Americans, they pay more for healthcare. They pay more for car insurance. They pay more for mortgages. We have disproportionate as far as, healthcare outcomes. We see it playing out with COVID amongst all, communities of color. And unless we really dig deep into the history of each of, who we are, it's going to happen again. And I don't want it to happen again. I look at all you young people and I'm inspired by what I see. I want a better world for you all.
That was very well said. Thank you.
So you mentioned a lot about these systems that are in place and that kind of oppress a lot of communities of color. So those that when we're talking about racial inequality, people often talk about systemic racism, which I'm assuming are those systems that you're talking about. How if you're comfortable sharing, how has systemic oppression impacted like you, and like how you approach like workforce and moving up in the workforce as a person of color?
Well, I think it's affected me that at one point I didn't believe that I could be in certain spaces. My mind wouldn't allow me to see myself, in a position of leadership because I had never seen it before. And that's huge, especially when it comes to women of color. What examples do you have, Chloe, that from a young age you were able to see that were outside of your family, right? You need to be able to see women that look like you, women that have the same skill set, or women that have the same passion as you, so that you can continue to dream. Your dream shouldn't start when you get to be 14, 15, and then you start to, explore and get that information yourself. So I think, as people of color, we're starting at a disadvantage. And that's unfortunate, because think of the brilliance that we're putting a lid on because we're not allowing folks to see themselves at the very highest levels. So I just think we're at a disadvantage as a country because we haven't fully tapped into that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That I think role models are extremely important, and like oftentimes they are like, if there are no role models and people ask for more role models and more representation for communities of color, it's just seen as like oppressive to white people because they're like not giving white people a platform and giving people of color a platform, and that just doesn't make sense at all because of everything that you said. So speaking of role models, what have been some role models for either of you, either personally or more famous ones that you have been able to look up to as growing up?
Currently, I want to say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because that's a woman who's fighting for the working class, fighting for average people, fighting for people who deserve to be recognized and helped. I do want to bring up this book. This is my mom's book. I have only gotten through like half of the first chapter, but Meshar Baradaran, I would say they're my role model too for making this book and bringing attention to the long history of inequalities.
And for me, I like very strong women, whether they be leaders in their communities, people that like Oprah, Maya Angelou. Those are some famous ones that, that I just think about the brilliance and then what they had to overcome. But then there are everyday heroes, people that I see in the workplace. One is Mari, who you all are very familiar with. I think early on she saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. So those type of role models are very important as well. People that are cheering you on and they can see past your mental limitations that you place on yourself. And I would also say that Michael is one of my role models as well. His passion for the environment, his passion for the equal treatment of people, and he's part of the LGBTQ community, and he is unapologetic as far as the rights that should be afforded to him. And I was never that forceful as far as pushing for things that I believe in. I think until I met some of these everyday people that showed me you do have to be passionate, you do have to fight for things. So my major role models are people that I interact with on a daily basis.
Thank you. So off of like the whole recommendation thing with the book, are there any like movies or any other books or any art creators within the Black community whose art you would recommend?
There's another book that blew my mind. It's called The Color of Money. And in it, it just lists all the ways that Black people in particular, the one that Michael is showing, that Black people in particular either pay more for, or, just over the history of our country, how we've been disadvantaged. And one of the major viewpoints that it helped change in me, we talk about reparations, right? If you had talked to me about that concept, 5 years ago, I would have said that would be unfair to other races. That would be unfair to other groups of people. How could you justify that, right? But then when you look into the history of our country, whether it be the GI Bill that at first Blacks were kept out of, whether it be the Homestead Act, money given to white Americans to purchase homes, and now they have land to build wealth. Well, at one point, Black people were kept out of that. When you talk about redlining, paying more for mortgages just because you're Black and you live in a Black neighborhood. And so those types of things have definitely opened my mind to, considering the things that need to be done to change the system. So from an art perspective, just all of these authors that are doing their due diligence to bring this knowledge to light is pretty impressive. So I'd recommend like any young person read, explore, understand your history, whether it be another racial group or your own, because you have to know your history and have an appreciation for who you are before you can appreciate others.
For sure. Thank you so much. So, I think I will be, oh, never mind. Ku'ule has a question for you guys.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ku'ule. If you guys are comfortable sharing, have roles of people of color in the media influenced you? This kind of popped into my head when you guys were talking about role models and saying how people of color have kind of been set back because there haven't been as many role models in media that are, I guess, people of color or not white. How have these roles in media affected you? And have you been affected by, I guess, stereotypes that people of color have portrayed in the media? Yeah.
Very cliche, but Oprah is a big role model of mine. Grew up watching her, and I just thought that she was a very classy lady that didn't necessarily fit, the model, whether it be her shape, whether it be her skin tone. She was just different, and she carried herself with a sense of class. And so I tried to model myself after that. Because growing up, came from a disadvantaged background. At one point, my family and I spent, time in a homeless shelter. So I always thought of myself as less than. So to see, a woman of color that came from that type of background to extend to that height and not lose her humility, that was really important to me. I'm glad to see more and more, different women in particular in media. Michael mentioned AOC in the political sphere, but that representation is so important. It is so very important. I can't believe that we're not talking about it more, but it's really important for you to be able to see yourself represented in the fabric of our country.
What came to mind for me is a lot of shows, not a lot of shows, but shows based in New York in the 90s, Seinfeld, Friends, all those. very predominantly all white cast. And I mean, at least now the population of New York is 25% Black. So, like, at least statistically, one or two of those friends should have been Black, but it wasn't, or they weren't. So, I guess how I've been affected by like roles of people of color in media is the lack thereof. Like, just, I was brushing my teeth earlier, and I thought it was weird that most, like, just to have a predominant, I mean, I guess it's not that weird, but having a largely white cast, while at least like 1 in 10 of those people could very well be Black, but aren't.
Thank you for sharing. One other question I had kind of relates to this also. Have you been affected by the stereotypes that people of color have played in like media, for example? I'm Chinese, so I've been affected by like the Asian stereotype that Asians are supposed to be smart. Has something like that? Oh, can you? Okay, I'll just type it in the chat.
And I think I caught part of that as far as maybe how negative stereotypes have affected me in particular. I think I've downplayed myself because if you see me in person, I'm 6'5". So I'm a very large, tall woman. So I've always downplayed myself to fit in and not to be overbearing. You know, I don't want to be that stereotypical Black woman, but what is that? Right? What have I allowed, what I've seen, you know, growing up affect me to not want to be that? What is a stereotypical Black woman? Strong, you know, taking care of her family. So it's affected me in that way, in that there's a perception that you have to look a certain way, you have to be a certain race, you have to have a certain educational background. And you're right, I think there are these boxes that people put us in, and you know, sometimes it's hard to get out of those boxes. And I think sometimes you lose who you are by trying to get away from that box when, you know, part of that box is really special.
I don't think people have, I don't have it anymore, but I had a bracelet that was like a rainbow bracelet that said gay on it. And still, it's like people would just either not see it or ignore it, but just assume that I am straight and I'm not. That, and also the type of music I listen to, people would expect me to listen to rap. I don't have words, but that's not exactly all I listen to.
Yeah, and I saw that when you and your brother were growing up. You know, we came from Southern California up to Washington mainly to, you know, to get a better life or have a better life. And so then they went to a predominantly white school. I think they were 2 of maybe 4 in the whole school. And so I saw that play out. I didn't realize until years and years later, you know, listening to some of the stories that are experiences that they had that I was unaware of. But in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, you know, I want them to have a good education. I want to set them up for, you know, success in life. And then to know that because they were a very small few, that they were, whether it be targeted or whether it be treated differently. So I think there was an expectation for them to be a certain way. And it was unfortunate because they didn't necessarily fit into that. But then when they did fit into that, it was just this weird experience, and I think very challenging experience for them.
Sorry, before Sophia asks her question, I have a question based off of that for Mike. Like, what was it like having to go to a predominantly white school as a person of color? And like, where did you find your place? Like, yeah, what was that like?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it much because that was elementary school. I think I would just stay away from people who did not have good energy. Yeah.
So what do you mean by good energy?
Well, the ones who didn't call me a monkey is what yeah.
So I think some experiences are too raw to even to talk about, but I think deeply impacted both of my children, right, to this day. So that one's a hard one to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you for like, yeah, trying to answer. Sophia has the next question.
Thank you, Chloe. I'm Sophia, and while you guys were talking about role models, I was just thinking, like, what does it take to be an influential role model or leader? Or, what did they have to do to grasp popularity for their opinion?
I missed the second part of that, Sophia. I know it's about being a role model, but I didn't catch the second part.
What did they have to do to, get popularity for their opinion?
So you can answer with a head nod, but are you asking what does a role model necessarily have to do to become that role model in my eyes?
Oh, did you not? Sorry, can you not hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Okay. I said, what did they have to do to grasp popularity for their opinion on civil rights?
I think they had to tap into what people were already feeling, right? So even like with the Black Lives Matter movement more recently, they tapped into something that was visceral. They tapped into frustration. They tapped into fear. They tap into, just exasperation as far as what people are feeling. But I also think you have folks that I tend to align with when you're tapping into inspiration. You're tapping into hope. So I think you can come from a place of fear and frustration, or you can come from a place of, inspiration and abundance. There's enough, freedom for us all. There's enough economic stability for us all. There's enough, eventually vaccines for us all. But how do we help each other to evolve? So for me, it appears that you're tapping into the emotional side of who people are to gain prominence as an inspirational leader.
My short answer would be anybody who fights for or understands the struggles of the working class.
Thank you. I have a different, kind of a follow-up question. So, do you think it would be different, or activists who aren't maybe a person of color said stuff inspirational and, oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
You're cutting out, so maybe if you could put it in the chat, maybe that'd be easier. Sorry.
Okay, got it.
Chloe, while Sophia types that question, I just want to thank you for the earlier question. You know, obviously it's an emotional topic that we need to have some more conversation around and about. But I don't think it's unique to my own children. I think that there are children across this country that have had similar experiences where they just felt like they didn't belong, and it was intentional at times. So just to see, you know, those children that have come through a system like that and they continue to thrive and to still have, you know, a passion for helping people is amazing to me. And again, thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, thank you guys for being willing to talk to a bunch of strangers about your experiences and personal stuff. So we really appreciate it. Okay, so while Sophia's writing down her question, we are going to move on to the next one. Okay. As students, we are taught that history is made by significant events that have happened in the past. History is about moments in time that are captured and only seen in the scope or lens we are provided. Our education system is something that we as Kamaliʻi BIPOC story often talk about because we feel like the world is so much bigger than the lens that they give us in classrooms. The conversations like the one we are having right now have really been able to help us broaden our scope and identify what we need to be looking at history from a different perspective. Antoine Sargent, artist and creator of the New Black Vanguard, mentions Awal Arisku's, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, great quote about making Blackness as universal as whiteness. When I think about what he's saying, I hear this is history in the making. This is the history that will not just capture a moment. The conversations that the world is having and the strength of really uplifting each other is making history. Today's leaders have not only honored those who have paved the way for them, but are creating opportunities for our generations to also become young activists. What do you hope to see happen in your lifetime that you would consider a historical moment in Black history?
I think it's not necessarily about Black people as far as what I would like to see, but it would disproportionately or proportionately help Black people. I think equal pay for women would not only help all women, but it would help the Black family. And I would like to see, equal protection for all people. I would like to see equal protection for all people, and that goes for, whether it be race, sexual orientation. We need to have protections. There are some states and some cities in our country today where you can still be fired or not, rented an apartment, or you can't get a mortgage based on who you love. So I think when you help and lift all groups, you ultimately help the Black community. So those two things I would really like to see in my lifetime.
I think equality for all is a very good thing. Personally, I can't think of like a single thing that would, I don't know, I can't like imagine that.
So can you not imagine it because you don't think it would happen?
A bit, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason that I asked that follow-up, because you're very idealistic, right? When I hear you talk and you talk about, the things that we need to do, whether it be for the environment or for people that are marginalized, you're very idealistic. So I would have thought that you would have been able to give us like one or two things because of how you think.
Well, the one thing I'm thinking about is like much can't change unless a white person is also doing it, but like more so or even like harder than people of color are. So until there's, I guess my answer is when there's more white Americans who are willing to like fight, speak up, learn, then I would think that's my answer.
Yeah, and I think I was inspired by what was going on in Portland when the whole Black Lives Matter movement first started, right? Well, not first started, but you know what I mean, right after George Floyd. You know, while people saw, you know, some of the destruction, and I just want to say for the record, I completely disagree with the destruction, but there was something else that was playing out. You know, we were in Ohio at the time, and just to see all of those white faces, you know, showing up day after day, fighting for Black lives. You know, I told my husband at the time, I said, you know, that's a sight to see. You know, but the narrative that was coming out of Portland was, you know, they're burning everything down. It's all violent. It's all this. It's all that. But what I saw was a sea of white people saying, you know, enough is enough. We stand with our Black brothers and sisters. And I thought that was very inspiring. That was very different from, you know, some of the past movements where it was largely just Black voices or voices of color that were out in the streets or demanding equal rights.
Yeah, totally. And that kind of answers Sophia's follow-up question that Sophia had before. Would someone who isn't a person of color still have the same impact on racial inequality? And you kind of said no, right? That white people kind of have to do more because people of color and white people don't have the same impact on racial inequality, right? So yeah. Would you like to add anything onto kind of what we were just talking about?
Just to go back to the question that we opened with, you know, when I think back onto, you know, a date or an event that happened, and I talked about Loving versus Virginia, you know, interracial couples being able to marry and, you know, have children. You know, the most beautiful thing that I've witnessed over my years is how you have maybe white grandparents who were adamantly against, say, their daughter or their son marrying outside of their race, but then you put their grandchild in their arms, and suddenly race has no meaning, right? All they see is as a human being that they're connected to. So I think as far as, you know, race relations and being able to have family members that come from a different race and are of a different race, I think it has done wonders for race relations. But I think it has also torn down those walls as far as how we view one another. Race is important because it's inherently who we are, right? But when it comes down to the content of who a person is and what they can be and what value they bring, it really truly means nothing. So hoping that we can get to a place where we can all appreciate one another and love one another and help each other succeed in every facet of life.
All right, Mike, anything to add?
No.
All right, thank you. That was great. Yeah, just really focusing on the fundamentals of a person, not necessarily thinking about what's wrong with them, more thinking about their potential and how great they can be. So moving on to our next question, kind of, I guess, a good closeout question. How is the next generation handling moving towards tolerance in education? And has the world been moving in the right or wrong direction?
I think the world is moving in the right direction. We're not moving fast enough. But like I said, inspired by what you all are doing. I was watching some videos that Mari shared with me of the conversations that you all have been having. And, I commend you all, because you're not only giving a platform to Black Americans, you're giving a platform to yourselves. You're giving a platform to young women, to young men. You all are exploring the humanity of who we are. And that is so inspiring for people my age, because I wish I had the same opportunities that you all have, where you can reach across boundaries, you can listen to whatever music you love and you enjoy, and you can love who you choose, right? So some of what you all are doing, my hat off to you. I am deeply inspired by what you all are doing. I do wish that we could move faster, but I love what you all are doing.
I think the world is moving in all sorts of directions. That's why I laughed a bit. But in terms of like tolerance and education, at least personally, I do not like the word or the term African Americans, especially for myself, and just honestly, like this year in 2020 and the past, I would say like 50 years, I have never been out of this continent. So to have a term placed on me of or for like the second largest continent, I don't know, it's just I just don't want to stand for that. So if I hear someone or someone is using that word, like referring to Black Americans, I told myself that I would like to correct them, because I don't think it's appropriate at all.
And I will vouch for that, because he's corrected me as far as whether using the term or not correcting others for using the term. But I think you see it play out in other groups, but I also prefer, Black American as well, for different reasons. But
I'm curious, like, if you're comfortable sharing, like, a little bit more why the term African American might be not as accurate or not as capable of describing the Black American community.
This is okay. It seems a little weird, but I was on Wikipedia one day, and it says African American generally denotes descendants of enslaved Black people who are from the United States, while some recent Black immigrants or their children may come to identify as African American are identified differently. Which, I mean, like reading that, yes, technically I am a descendant of enslaved Black people, but I'm not a descendant of an enslaved Black person or people. Like, my parents are not that.
yeah, and for me personally, it doesn't go that deep. It was more about, I noticed that only happens with people of color, right? So we never denote, white Americans as far as the continent of where their family came from, but we do it for people of color. So I just chose, Black American instead of African American. Is it an informed opinion? Probably not. It's just a preference for me.
Yeah, and it's great to hear. And I'm sure not everybody has their own reasons for why they like to be called anything. So I guess important to ask, right? Important to listen when they give you specifics, right? So that was the last question. So kind of to close, just a final statement or something. What message do you want to send in general about Black history or Black American experience? And like, why did you think it was important necessarily to come here and share with us?
I think it's important to share with anyone and any group that is willing to listen to your story, because it's through our stories that we learn about each other, right? So I have a deep affinity for people in general. So if someone is willing to listen to my story and my take, it's not the only story, not the only take, but I believe that we build stronger bonds. So I'm all about building bonds, and I want to hear your stories as well. So that's why I chose to participate, and it has been a fulfilling experience. So thank you for having me.
I think it is great to listen to others, and I talk a lot about things that could change, things that should change. And I figured if I didn't come here today, I would be changing nothing by doing exactly what I don't want to happen.
Yeah. So, well, thank you both for being willing to come and share your stories. So, before we close today, I would like to invite all of our students who helped put all this together to introduce themselves, starting with Kina.
Aloha, my name is Kina. I am 10 years old, a fifth grader in the Hillsborough School District. I identify as Filipino. Mahalo.
Aloha, my name is Neema. I am 14 years old. I am a freshman within the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I identify as Japanese. Mahalo.
Aloha, my name is Kohoku. I'm a sophomore in the Beaverton School District, and I identify as Native Hawaiian.
Hi, my name is Ku'ule. I'm 17. I'm a junior in the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I identify as mixed.
Okay. Aloha, my name is Sophia. I'm a seventh grader in the Beaverton School District. I identify as Japanese.
Aloha, my name is Haley. I am a sophomore in the Beaverton School District. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I identify as Japanese and Portuguese.
And I'll introduce myself again with my family's heritage. I'm Chloe. Like I said, I'm a freshman in the Beaverton School District. She, her, hers are my pronouns, and my family is Puerto Rican and Mexican. So mahalo nui loa to both of you for coming and sharing your stories with us, and for all of you that joined us. We hope that today's Talk Story session has helped you understand and answer many of the questions you also had. Like we said before, we hope to use this platform as a safe space for all youth to come together and talk about the issues that we, a key component of today's society, are faced with as we move into the future. No subject is off limits. We hope to continue these subjects weekly, and we need you, our peers, friends, and family. For more information or ways to be involved, please email info@kalohcc.org or visit www.kalohcc.org. Again, mahalo for joining us, and we will see you next time.
We need healing.
We need justice.
We need to take care of our neighbors.
We are grappling with a global pandemic
and a bright spotlight on the injustices facing Black Portlanders.
From businesses facing foreclosures
to families fighting to stay safe and housed.
These real challenges require us to act.
The Black Resilience Fund is providing immediate financial relief
to thousands of our neighbors,
covering utility bills, rent, groceries, and more.
Thanks to everyday people, from nurses, writers, community leaders, to moms and dads.
Our dollars are making a difference in ways we never have before.
By showing up for Black lives and supporting our neighbors,
we are demonstrating the healing that our entire country needs.
Right now.
Right now.
We do heal.
We do heal.
We do heal.
Help make a difference.
Help make a difference.
Help make a difference. Donate.